Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundaries. We believe in cultivating curiosity and transformation that is rooted in profound love. The COVID-19 pandemic has irrevocably shaped how connections are formed in congregations across the United States and the world. The Church of the Larger Fellowship is committed to being a resource within Unitarian Universalism and beyond. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine Quest to our online community hub and our letter writing ministry. We have found ways to build connection and community, even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison. The CLF supports the ministries of those who hold target identities: Blue, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, Trust, Transgender Religious UU Professionals Together, and Drum, Diverse Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries, just to name a few. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed, even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message. Hello, everyone. I'm Aisha Hauser. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm here joining you from Seattle, Washington, land of the coast, Salish people, where it is an unusually bright and sunny February day. Our co-hosts, Chris and Michael, are out today, so DC and I will be hosting the first time we'll be engaging in this topic on The VUU. We'll be talking about polyamory and non-monogamy. But first, I want to, DC, how are you? Where are you? What's going on?
Hi, Aisha. I am well. I mean, it's sort of cold and it looks like Seattle actually out there. It's kind of cold and damp and wet, and it's late February in central Pennsylvania. I am coming to you from Northumberland, Pennsylvania, ancestral home of the Susquehannock people, and also holds the distinction of being where Joseph Priestley lived out his days here in Northumberland. Oh. Yes. Oh. And I served a little congregation here, and we're having a good time. So, yeah.
We switched weather. It sounds like I got sunny weather that's usually on the East Coast, and you got Seattle weather. And I think
you can have it back. I don't like it.
Yeah, we will for you tomorrow. I'm wearing my my faith is love, UU values, protect trans kids shirt today. I wear it often, especially when I travel. And it is this week, the world lost Next Benedict. Didn't lose them. They were assaulted in a bathroom in Oklahoma. Thanks to the hateful, gross governor and hateful rhetoric nationally, the governor signed a law, I believe, a year ago, an anti-trans bathroom bill.
and to protect children. All it does is target trans and non-binary children. So
yeah.
It's gross.
Yeah. Hey, just want to shout out to say hey to Catherine Clarenbach, who is joining us online watching. Yay.
Hi, Catherine.
Awesome person.
A colleague, an amazing minister. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully we have more folks who'll say hello and chime in. We may not say hi to everybody, but sometimes when we see folks who are our friends and we haven't seen in a while. So I do want to let folks know that we will be talking about how to get resources and support trans folks of all ages and their families in future episodes. And we will also do an episode celebrating the beauty of and affirming celebrations of life of trans and non-binary folks who are part of our communities and who we love. The point was made more than once that we can't only rally around folks who are part of the trans and non-binary community only when a tragedy happens. So I feel that and I hear that. Whew, so
I have, just on a little trans note, a little weirdness. I have been invited by the local Susquehanna University, their LMNOP office, the diversity and gender and all the words office, is doing this sort of interactive thing where they're inviting the students there to have time with what they're calling trans elders.
Oh.
And I'm still horrified at that term, because I'm going later today to sit and talk with some students, and they're referring to me as an elder, and I am so not okay with that. I'm not even sure I'm an adult, never mind an elder. But there we go. So yeah, I realized I'm just like the boring old white fat guy now. I'm just like,
no, not boring. And also, somebody called me a young elder, so I think you're a young elder. I love being an elder. I want people. Listen,
like my body feels like an elder, but emotionally, I think I'm still like 18.
Is that the truth, though? I can't even.
Right?
I can't wrap my mind around that. I'm. Oh, Catherine makes a very good point. You aren't an elder until others recognize you as such. Very good point, because I never, you and I, folks called us elders, and I'm like, yeah, and then I was like, yeah, but I embraced it. I was like, okay, what perks do I get with being an elder?
Right. Yeah. No, I totally have the Peter Pan syndrome. I am not growing up if I don't have to. And like my back and my knees and my hips and my ankles all have different opinions about it. But for me, totally, I am
so
really having a hard time with this.
My co-lead got me this mug. It is not one of those obnoxious Stanley cups.
Read it, it's backwards.
It says, if my mouth doesn't say it, my face will.
Oh my God. Ain't that the truth?
So thank you, Christina Rivera, for getting me that perfectly.
You and I should never play poker.
Oh, no.
We would lose all our money.
There's no world. I could play anything that involves being stoic.
No.
So we have a really Marchaé is one of my favorite people, so I'm really excited to have Marchaé Grair on the show today. So I'm going to wait till Marchaé gets on the
video,
and then I will introduce them.
Yeah.
Hi, Marchaé.
Hey, Marchaé.
So today like I said, we're going to talk about a topic we've never talked about before. But first, I'm going to introduce our amazing guest, Marchaé Grair. They, she pronouns, is a storyteller, spiritual director, teacher, and facilitator, engaging hearts and minds at the intersections of spirituality and collective liberation. Amen. They are the communications director and interim program coordinator at Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism, and the director of programs at Still Harbor, a training organization for spiritual directors and caregivers. Their writing examines universal experiences through the perspective of being spiritual, Black, queer, non-binary, disabled, and polyamorous. Marchaé writes essays about family, identity, and belonging. Their piece, Holy, a Polyamorous Blessing, was featured in Held, Blessings for the Depths, an anthology published by Enfleshed. What an honor, Marchaé, to have you with us on this inaugural topic.
Yeah.
Welcome to the VUU.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to jump in with I'll just say a mini little bit about myself. I was in a 30-year monogamous marriage relationship, and then I left that, and now I am kind of jumped in with both feet into the world of non-monogamy and polyamory. So wherever you want to start on this topic, I think there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about non-monogamy and polyamory. And maybe we could start with Marchaé, you talking about the difference between the two terms, because they're not exactly interchangeable. One is an umbrella. And I always get wrong which the umbrella is. I believe it's non-monogamy is the umbrella, and then polyamory is one of them. But go ahead, Marchaé.
Yeah, let's define some terms for us, please.
Wow,
Yes.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I will tell you all the truth. I'm not feeling 100%, but I'm going to do my best. I didn't have time to read all of the poly resources I have. So this is going to be a lot of just what I think. In terms of the difference between non-monogamy and polyamory, non-monogamy is the umbrella. So anytime somebody is not just seeking or paired with one person, that would be non-monogamy. Non-monogamy can include many different communities, people who are swingers, people who are polyamorous, which is what we'll talk about today, people who are somewhere in between, people who are dating but not seeking any kind of long-term commitment or connection. So anytime you're talking about a relationship that is not one person seeking to pair off with one person, you're talking about non-monogamy. And I appreciate you not using the term ethical non-monogamy. That is a term that a lot of people, especially as polyamory has entered into kind of the lexicon, a lot of people use that term. The reason that I don't use that term is because it almost implies that you need to indicate that that non-monogamy is ethical. And many, many people who I love and care about, many people in the ethical non-monogamy community are doing it because they have are in those communities because they have integrity, because they choose to be honest and open about who they are and who they love, who they want to be with, how they want to engage their desires. And it is somewhat offensive to assume that those who choose to engage non-monogamy or polyamory have to first declare that they're doing it ethically, because that is the point. If you're not participating in non-monogamy ethically, then it's actually not non-monogamy, it's dishonesty.
That was going to be my first question, which was, what is always the question seems to be, well, isn't that cheating? What's the difference between non-monogamy and cheating?
What's the difference between non-monogamy and cheating? I think that for folks for whom monogamy has informed most of their understanding of the world, there is an assumption that anytime anybody else is involved in the picture, anytime somebody is with more than one person, that the other person doesn't know, that there's some level of secrecy involved. Mm-hmm. When someone is cheating, that means that you are engaging some kind of behavior that your significant other doesn't know about. You are doing something with a layer or level of secrecy. That's why I wouldn't limit cheating to being inherently physical. There can be emotional cheating. There can be you can be engaging somebody at a level of emotional depth that you're not being completely honest about, because you've decided that for whatever reason you need to protect your partner from that information, or your significant other from that information. And I think the reality is that cheating is about power and control. It has nothing to do with being
in a non-consensual way.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with taking care of somebody's heart or taking care of your relationship's well-being. It's doing something that is not consensual, not agreed upon. Non-monogamy, everybody knows what, everybody has consented to what's happening, whatever that everything is, whether it's the kink community, the leather community, whether it's I've been to some polyamorous mixers. Everybody's kind of like in on what's happening, and nothing happens outside of somebody's bodily autonomy, outside of somebody's outside of what somebody says is okay, and everybody in the ecosystem of the relationship knows what's happening. So for example, I have multiple partners, so it's not just about one of my partners knowing what's happening between me and that partner. It's about my other partner being able to consent to being in a relationship with somebody who's participating in whatever I happen to be doing with that other person, whether that is some kind of physical or sexual intimacy, or that's some kind of commitment that I've made, whether it's around like finances, sharing a home, going on vacation. Everybody is in the know. That is a requirement of non-monogamy, and that's why we don't have to like scream from the high heavens that it's ethical, because it should be consensual, or else it's not non-monogamy.
What, Marchaé, so this is, what is it that you want folks to know about polyamory that you hold dear? That, I mean, there are a lot of misconceptions out there for folks who are conditioned into, especially heteronormative monogamy, or just in general, monogamy is held up as the ideal. So what are some of the things that you want folks to know about polyamory? Because this is going to live on the interwebs and in podcasts, so it would be cool, especially for
Don't scare me. No.
It's an awesome thing, Marchaé.
I think from a theoretical or from a values-based place, I would say that one of the reasons that I like to think about polyamory as being values aligned is because monogamy as normative was created that way in order to uphold capitalism. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying, the patriarchy, I mean, anything that you property. Want to, any kind of like ism, any kind of oppression.
That's right.
Monogamy actually serves. Now, I want to be clear. I don't want anybody listening to like leave, and say, Marchaé said I'm monogamous. I'm a racist. Like, I just didn't say that. And I know how quick people can be to make leaps. That's not what I'm saying. Right. But one of the reasons that I think that oppressive groups or oppressive energies tend to go for education first is because when you understand history, you can really think critically about the ways that you engage your life now and how things were set up and why. And just like, I'm not a historian, but very, very quickly, I was revisiting a book this morning in preparation for this conversation, and it was talking about how monogamy was introduced in Europe, and it was explicitly addressing that because so much of what happened in Europe was then dispersed across the globe in the form of colonization. And it was talking about how there were actually like witch trials in Europe, and how a lot of the women who were persecuted were people who were not in traditional like relationships and who could not reproduce. And one of the reasons that monogamy was like created, for lack of a better word, or set as the standard, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is because the economy shifted from feudalism to capitalism. And so then under capitalism, you are looking to not just commodify goods, but commodify people. You need workers for capitalism to continue. And so women who were not able to produce or who would not find husbands were then some of the women who were immediately persecuted. And those women also happened to be a lot of the people who were pushing back on some of the systems that were changing.
Mm.
And so when you look at something as sacred, I would argue looking at something as sacred because you hold like a person sacred, or you hold yourself sacred, your own body sacred. That is why I think relationships, whether they're with yourself, with others, etc., that's why I think those things are sacred. But to uphold a relationship type as sacred outside of others is not just like, I think, unhelpful, but it's also ahistorical. Monogamy has not always existed, or at least has not always been the standard.
No, and then there were, you know, laws around it, especially in the United States. I mean, once I got divorced and the first year I did my taxes, I'm like, holy fuck, the tax code is just set up for two people to save money. I mean, anyway, I mean, our tax system's trash, and we could talk about that in another show. One of the things that I think one of the things that's interesting that people, what I've come to, I'm now 3 years into a completely different lifestyle than the one that I had. What I say to folks is, what makes any relationship toxic makes any relationship toxic or dysfunctional or problematic. Whatever style relationship you have, whether it's more than one partner, monogamy or non-monogamy, the elements of how to be in that relationship, whatever makes it problematic is polyamory and non-monogamy are not inherently the issue, because we don't apply this to friends. We don't say, I'm jealous that you're spending more time with one friend or and this is kind of now delving into relationship anarchy territory, which there's some elements of relationship anarchy which came out of Sweden, and there's a whole manifesto, y'all can Google it, about that all relationships are equal. And so where I'm like, my relationship with my children is not equal to somebody that I just met yesterday. So, I mean, I'm not sure that I can personally buy into that, but I do agree that the centering, to your point, Marchaé, of romantic and monogamous unions is very much about centering capitalism and upholding a certain value that supports violent extractive capitalism rather than community. And it also creating this idea of a nuclear family as you know, it's alongside of individualism, has hurt communities, has hurt the idea of loving more than one person, whether it's romantic or not, builds community, and we have more incentive to fight for the collective. So there's a lot to be gained by capitalism by lifting monogamy as the norm. But DC, you had a good question about co-parenting.
Right. It wasn't really a question. It was just one of those, like, another way that we have relationships that may or may not be sexual. And I remember, and I don't know, a number of years ago, I met and I got to interview a guy named David J., who's an activist with the asexual movement out in San Francisco. And he is polyamorous. He is in a polycule that have intentionally, like, some of the people there are sexually intimate with other people, but they've created a family of choice through which they choose to raise children. So, like, the whole notion of your job is to produce progeny, is just, it's offensive. It's just horrid and right, blah. Anyway, but yes. So something I just wanted to note, just because I'm sort of a book nerd, Dossie Easton, who was one of the primary authors of a book called The Ethical Slut, which is a primer when it comes to, it was like one of the first significant mainstream books on non-monogamy and on polyamory. And Dossie Easton turns 80 on Monday.
Wow.
And she came up in my Facebook feed. She was at a party for something, and somebody's like, "She turns 80 on Monday, yay!" And another more, and I found that book to be sort of heteronormative, hetero-focused. But there's a more recent book that I also like by Tristan Taormino called "Opening Up."
Yeah.
And in that book, she addresses much more queer culture and the leather and kink communities, which have a sort of a different dynamic on their own as far as how relationships are structured. So those are just two books for people looking for resources.
And another one, Pleasure Activism, that was edited by Marie Brown, that centers queer folks of color also, and they also touch. I mean, the book, the centrality of the book is not necessarily polyamory, but about just activists who can all, joys and active resistance, to remember what we're fighting for, and that we can center love and liberation and in these ways. Marchaé, I wanted to ask, so I came out, I don't know why I put that to quotes, to my young adult children that I'm non-monogamous and polyamorous, and this is it completely, they didn't quite know what to do with it, right? So and I'm really trying to normalize for them. Their father is much more conservative than I am. And so it's completely contrasting people, right? And one of the things, I had a conversation with my daughter about her dating life, and I said something like, well, maybe there was someone she was interested in. I said, well, maybe they're polyamorous. She goes, Mom, I'm not polygamous like you. And I'm like, okay,
no.
I'm not polygamous either. That's not what this is. And so while my kids, they love me because I'm their mom, and I'm so blessed, we have a great relationship. And I talk about, with very, very appropriate boundaries, but my life, only to take out the shame of what I know. Forget that I never instilled in them that shame, but society does. There's still such stigma because these ridiculous shows about, I'm not gonna say ridiculous, but these reality shows about the Mormon community and polygamy, it's only about men having as many wives as they want, and which is where do we begin with how problematic that is? And so it's really just centering some really unhealthy behavior. So Marchaé, what are some best practices? That's not what I take the circuitous route to the point, and sometimes I get off the exit without getting to where I was going. I guess I'm asking about how you came out to your family, or if you feel comfortable, like what was their reaction, or how was, because like me, you're very open about it. So I'm curious about that. If you want to talk about that, you can talk about something else if you don't want to.
I'm happy to answer that question. I did realize that when I answered the question about the difference between non-monogamy and polyamory, I don't think I explained what polyamory was.
Please do.
So I just want to make sure. I'm very big on, that's like my teacher hat. I'm like, everybody has to be on the same page.
Yes. Same.
So,
yes.
So we talked about some things that are under the umbrella of non-monogamy, and polyamory is one of those things. And that is, when we're talking about polyamory, we're talking about people who are open to who are in relationships with other people. Usually there is like a commitment, maybe emotional component attached. And also to DC's point, it looks different for some people because people fall in different places on the romantic and sexual spectrums. And so somebody's polyamory can look one way because their relationship or sexual orientation looks one way, and someone else's could look another way. So when we talk about polyamory, that's what we're talking about. And that distinction is helpful because some people are open to connecting with people in many ways, but where they feel like they are not as interested is in having like multiple relationships.
Okay.
So I say that without judgment. I am polyamorous. I have multiple committed relationships. So in terms of how I discussed that with my family. I was talking about bringing a partner who they had not met home. And so instead of, I've been queer for what feels like forever. I feel so when I meet people who came out later in life, I feel like older than I am. I'm 35, but I've just have been talking about like gay stuff forever. I don't even know if I can cuss because I was about to cuss there, but I'm not going to.
You can cuss. We cuss here.
I've been talking about gay stuff forever. So at some point I just decided I'm really tired of coming out and having this like, big, like I have to set the stage. I have to do, I'm like, I am, bringing this person home. This person is my romantic partner, and I am still because I'm legally married. So, and that is the partner who I was with first. So I was like, I'm still, with my wife, still love my wife very much, just to be clear. But this person's coming home with me. And that's literally all I said, which is a lot different from how I talk to my family about being queer.
And do you feel comfortable saying, like, were they like, oh, awesome, more partners?
They were actually, they were just like, I actually was very surprised, because it just wasn't a big deal in the ways that I had said. I had made it very big in my head. And I'm very clear. I'm fortunate that was my experience. That's not everyone's experience. And I think because I have been very open about being queer, being genderqueer, being sex positive, the list goes on. I think there's not much I could do to shock a lot of people who love me. And I also recognize that that's not everyone's experience.
And I will say here in Seattle, and I'm positive it's different depending on where you are in the country or the world. There is a thriving poly community. There are poly meetups everywhere. There are there are swinger communities. I mean, there's all kinds of configurations of if you want to have an alternative to what is held up as just an exclusive partnership. It's here, and you can find it. So I'm very fortunate in that respect to be here, and I do want to let folks know that if you Google and Facebook has a lot of groups that are both global, national for either non-monogamy or polyamory. I see more polyamory groups that are named as such. I don't see quite as many. We're non-monogamous. I do want to go back for a second because somebody. Matt Meyer, who's here. Hey, Matt, had not heard, he wrote, I've never heard the case for not using ethical in the description. So interesting and helpful when we were talking about, I had heard it was actually part of the kink and leather community not to use the word ethical with non-monogamy exactly for the reason you're saying, because what we want to do is dismantle the notion of centering any one way of being. And the connection really is to liberation, is bodily autonomy. This is all connected to bodily autonomy and having the freedom in a responsible way, because we do want to say, I think I want to name that what is very true about being intentional when being non-monogamous and polyamorous is with difficult conversations. Because it is, jealousy still comes up, and jealousy reflects an unmet need. And so how do you say to your partner, my needs are being met, and yet you're, having a new partner come into the picture, and here are some of the things that I need. And being able to be, my experience has been deeply vulnerable. There is a deep vulnerability in it. I will say this, it also helps with all my other relationships. It's like, not that I've ever hidden myself, because that's not who I am as a person. But I do think there's a different kind of vulnerability when folks, in order to get consent, you have to be authentic and honest, I think. I'm happy to hear you both speak on that. But that's been my experience, is the vulnerability needed to do this in an ethical way that doesn't cause harm is something that is learned, and we need to uncondition. We need to unlearn the ways that society tells us we have to be a certain way. Well, white society, white supremacy culture.
I think that non-monogamy broadly, and polyamory more specific to my context, invites you to really be in touch with your desires and your boundaries in ways that I think are generally like helpful for anyone to be in relationship with their desires and boundaries, but that are especially important when you are engaging non-monogamy. I think that one of the reasons that I think that non-monogamy is a helpful invitation for me is because I'm invited to think about the scripts that I've learned about relationships and how some of those scripts aren't helpful. And that's why arguably I would say not starting with monogamy as the default is helpful even for somebody who might be monogamous, because polyamory, non-monogamy is just an invitation to say, what did I learn this relation, like that somebody owes me, for example, because somebody's in a relationship. Did I learn that someone owes me all of their time? Did I learn that if like I've had a conversation about some kind of physical intimacy one time that we are going to have that every time? Like, did I learn that if somebody loves me, I have to be the most important person to them, or otherwise that love is untrue? Like those are all scripts that I've been invited to question because of non-monogamy, that I actually would invite people to question just generally. And I mean, those are some of the scripts that I've been invited to. But I think if you sit with the question, like, what have I been taught about relationships? What of those things might be like normative, unhelpful? And what does like freedom look like within relationships? That invitation can be really helpful no matter whatever your orientation to relationships is.
And the truth is, the being married exclusively and having an exclusive relationship doesn't guarantee shit. It does not. It does not guarantee that you have somebody's love forever, that you know, that right? I mean, that's
it doesn't even guarantee that you split the bills. Jesus.
I mean, right? we enter into, to your point, Marchaé, a story that we've been conditioned into, which the reality isn't always. We make assumptions about that story, about the when I was in my 20s, I was still in New Jersey. I went to, including me, I got married in my early 20s, way too early. My friends, all of us, because that's what we, did. And I'll tell you, we spent so much time on that fucking day and so much money. And afterwards, and this was my little clique of people for the next 10 years. We were like, what the fuck did we do? What the fuck did we do? I mean, listen, I adore my children. I had an adventurous life, and the story of like, this is it, and you have to make do, and the supports, unless it is, there's a revolution right now of women really raising the bar for straight cisgender heterosexual men, and they don't know what to do about it. So we have a question here. So before I go on that tangent, which won't be helpful, can we talk about how monogamy and polyamory are work and seem to require a different level of personal engagement and communication than the capitalist cultural default of monogamy? We sure can. This is from Sarah Blackthorne. Who wants to start with this one? Because I got a lot to say.
I want to hear Marchaé.
I took a comedy workshop like a year or so ago, and one of my opening jokes was that when people talk about polyamory, they think a lot about like wild, uninhibited like sex or things like that. And in reality, I just have a lot of shared calendars.
Marchaé.
It's scheduling. It's not orgies. It's calendars.
But all jokes aside, It goes back to kind of when we were talked about consent earlier. I think a lot of times people can struggle to think about what that looks like in real life. Like, we're in a culture where having consent is not as wild of an idea as maybe it once was. We're like, of course you should have consent. Like, yes. But then when we talk about what that requires, then we go into, I think the person who asked the question, their name was Sarah. Then we go into what Sarah's talking about. Like, what does consent require? Like, what does it mean to move at the speed? I've heard, I think Adrienne Marie Brown say, move at the speed of trust. What kind of conversations does it take if you want to do something with one partner that you hadn't anticipated? So you had agreed with another partner, oh, I will never, for example, some people start off, it's fine if we have sex with other people, but don't fall in love. What happens if suddenly the thing that you agreed to is, and you could not predict that it would happen? What happens when that happens?
Right.
What conversations does it take? Just using this example, and I'm actually using this example because it doesn't apply to my life. I never agreed to this. So to be clear, not a personal
same.
example.
Yeah.
But what would it take with the person who the new person you're then in love with? What kind of negotiations or conversations do you have with them to say, hey, this previous relationship I had, this was outside of what I had even conceived of. And so it's going to take some time to move through like what I want, what is okay with my partner. So here's what I can offer right now. That's a lot of continued emotional labor. And that's just talking about the emotional component, not just the logistics of having multiple relationships. And so multiple people need support. Multiple people want to go on vacation. Multiple people have family reunions. You are factoring in things like safer sex conversations with multiple people, and somebody has a new partner and somebody wants to go to a kink party, and it's like, well, then that means I need to get tested then, and then I have to tell that person has to get tested then. And so I cannot stress enough both the emotional and actual just like labor that go into any kind of non-monogamous configuration, that especially the level of communication required. There's a podcast called Polyamory that I listen to occasionally that talks about non-monogamous relationships, and someone was talking about how they're neurodivergent, and sometimes they can only have one partner, or sometimes they don't have any partners at all, because the amount of like labor that it takes is sometimes like they're in touch with themselves and they're like, oh, I don't have the capacity right now to date, or I don't have the capacity right now to have another partner. And so I think, and I will use this as a personal example, I think when some people come into non-monogamy as individuals, I think probably relationship anarchy and solo polyamory could probably be another episode. I'm open to talking about this if you want, but that's like that's complicated in its own way. But I came into non-monogamy by opening a relationship. And so there are there's a lot of like
other thing.
There was like a lot of work that I had to do to almost learn how to hear my own voice separate of like what it meant to be part of a couple. Because I've been conditioned, even though I'm queer, I still have been conditioned in a lot of ways to fit like a heteronormative script as a queer person. That still my goal should be to be married and to be part of a couple that kind of moves with like one brain. And so then when my relationship opened, suddenly I was like, I was made aware of the fact that, wait, we're two individuals in a relationship. Like our desires are separate. Like I still am making individual decisions, and I'm still have individual dreams and hopes that influence who I am as a partner, but also that influence other things as well. And then when I started dating, I had to be honest with myself that I had there was a point where I had to like close the dating apps. At the beginning of this year, I was like, I am deleting the apps. I need to write. I need to spend time with my existing family, partners, etc. And like, you know, so it's like it opens up this whole other when suddenly you're like, okay, I'm not restricted by this. That doesn't mean that you don't have to think about like limits and boundaries.
Yes.
Like I still have limits as an individual, even if those limits are not informed by my partners telling me what to do. So that's a whole different orientation to like living in the world for people who have been really, really part of heteronormative or mononormative culture. Yes, I see somebody commented using the word polysaturated. That is a word that people use to describe that phenomenon.
Yeah, you know, I'm in the middle of central Pennsylvania, right? So in theory, I'm polyamorous, right? If there were people around, like, and if I had like the bandwidth to have relationships, right? In the past, I've had relationships. Mine tend to be fairly, I'll have one significant emotional partner, but then have other more casual partners. And the last significant partner I was with was wired so that they had multiple very deep, very intense relationships. And I haven't got the spoons to do all of that. I just don't have the bandwidth. My poor little brain just can't go that way. But it made them happy, and that's awesome. And I did my thing, and they were okay with that. But it was not something that everybody understood. And we have a comment here from Sarah again. The gift of renegotiating relationship structures and boundaries when those limits are reached. You know, that's tricky. That's tricky.
I have when I was a couple of years ago, dated this dude, and me and my metamor are two people who are dating the same person. She's the best thing that came out of that relationship. We both dumped him, and she does something called a State of the Union, a quarterly. And I'm like, can I take that? And it's amazing. And it's this list of questions that you check in with your partner, and it's so helpful.
Yes.
The other thing that I learned from her, and her name is Shauna. Shout out Shauna, one of my favorite people. I've learned a lot about polyamory, healthy polyamory from her, but is creating a document about my needs. What are my needs? What is it that I'm looking for in a relationship? What are my expectations? Because, and I've kind of been thinking about it like, this is really centering so that I can come into a certain thing, or even have, so I understand for myself, what time do I need for myself, right? And I don't have to fill every single minute, because it is the, when I first entered into this, it was like, it was a lot, right? Polysaturated with a quickness, but then it gets to be where I'm like, I don't have time to hang out with my dog, my nesting partner is my puppy. So she, I was like, she doesn't argue with me. She does a little, but basically does what I say. Anyway, I'm digressing again. But I think taking that, what I found is getting out of a monogamous mindset has connected me more to community and strengthened even my friendships, in addition, whether or not they're romantic, and expanded my notion. And I think I had already a strong notion of what it is to be in community, but I will say, kind of unlearning and dismantling the notion of centering monogamy has really been transformative in a profound way. And I really feel that dismantling monogamy is one of the ways, really one of the important ways to dismantle the patriarchy. Because the more people you are authentic with, are in relationship with, and create intentional community, the more community is strengthened. And I think that's been a really profound learning for me, that I've been super appreciative of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to follow up on what you're saying, I would hate to leave anybody with the impression that polyamory is some magical solution or non-monogamy is some magical solution. Just like many things, it's neutral unless you apply values of liberation.
Thank you. Yes.
And so to your point, I think there's work to do in non-monogamous communities. I think, for example, a lot of the books that we discussed were by white folks, and even a lot of them are about couples. And so there's this phrase that exists within non-monogamous spaces that's couples privilege. So it's like, what kind of work are people doing who open up a relationship or who are seeking maybe to date together? What kind of work are they doing to acknowledge the privilege within coming into something as a unit, or coming into a relationship with an established partner and having and working through the power dynamics of what that looks like to have somebody kind of present already when someone else is coming into the picture. So there's a lot of couples privilege in non-monogamy. There's a lot of racism. There's even in kink communities, even in leather communities. And there's still this false notion. There's a book that just came out. I think it's called More. It's a memoir by a white woman. And so a lot of people who are reviewing the book are responding with this feedback like, polyamory is for rich white people. God. Because it's a new book, but it fits the script of who is non-monogamous and who gets the most representation. So to your point, what we're really talking about here, I did struggle with the frame of relationship anarchy, because I'm like, what are you talking about? All relationships aren't the same. But I think a different way to look at relationship anarchy is what does it mean to not privilege a relationship just because of the title of it? So what does it look like to set your priorities, what does it look like to put your priorities in place in relationship to the relationships that you have? And by that, I mean the nature of them. This person is someone who has shown up for me. This person is a part of my community. This person needs me right now. This person is sick and they need care. This person, this person is having a hard time. This person wants to celebrate with me, so I'm going to celebrate with them. What does it look to relate to relationships that way, instead of saying, well, this is my partner, so if they don't like it, of course I'm not going to do it.
Yeah. I think I want to read out Catherine Clarenbach wrote, the more we are authentic, whatever our preferred relationship styles, including monogamy, the more we can strengthen community. Amen and Ashe. Marchaé, yes, I think, first of all, the communities that are alternative, the folks who get the most attention tend to be white, for sure, especially, but I think that's starting to change, I hope. But I agree about not lifting up any relationship style as there is no panacea. There's work. We have to work together as a community, no matter what we do to get to liberation. None of it is going to be the key. It's all of it is the key, right? And it is, I'm so glad that we started this conversation. I imagine we're going to have many more shows in the future now that we've opened the door to expand folks' notions of how we have set up this U.S. society based on capitalism, and how we can start to kind of chip away at what has been really oppressive systems that have really hurt and to tragic results, especially women, femmes, non-binary, trans folks who have been impacted by patriarchy. Marchaé, we have 5 minutes left. Anything else that you want to let our folks know? Thank you folks for joining us, but I want to leave the last 5 minutes to you. Anything left unsaid or anything you'd like to leave folks with?
I think that I would like to say, you don't have to, if you're listening to this conversation and there's like a spark, you don't have to know all of the answers to engage non-monogamy. I work with a therapist who I love, and one of the things she invites me to do is to be in touch with my feelings without having to have a plan to implement something in relationship to the feelings. So if I say, sometimes I will feel a level of like fear or guilt if I'm suddenly thinking something that I think is like non-normative or might upset someone or might upset a partner, might upset a metamor, or maybe maybe I'm thinking something that just scares me. And my reaction based on personality, how I've been socialized, maybe a little astrology, I don't know, is to always think, okay, in order for me to like name this desire, in order for me to even like move on this desire, I have to have everything mapped out. And that is just untrue. There is something that becomes unlocked when you become more honest with yourself, but engaging your desires authentically. For some people, I would love to say, and then I was poly and all my dreams came true. But the reality is that it has taken a really long time for me to get to the place that I could articulate my desires even to myself and then to others. And so I would just say, like, if you're hearing that voice that says that there is something that you're not honoring within your desires, then I hope that you listen to it, and I hope you give it the space that it needs to really open up a new path for your truths.
Whew. Thank you so much. This was such a great show. Thank you, DC. And thank you, Lucretia Williams, who is behind the chalice, our producer of The VUU. And we will see you all next week. Thank you so much. I honor you and so appreciate that you said yes. And thank you to all our guests. Have a great week, everybody.
All right, bye.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The VUU.